Well, thank you, Susan. And I'm delighted to be here because, well, we like the holidays, don't we? And
Absolutely.
and our pets should too. And so this is a dog named Ellie, who I got to know rather well because she had a behavior issue, and she looks pretty happy right there, doesn't she? I mean, she's letting the good times roll. Here's the thing: when we're enjoying, like Thanksgiving, and we have family and we're trying to have a great time and cook a meal, we really don't have a lot of time to think about, well, how are the pets doing? And what I want you to take away from this little meeting is how to be proactive, how to recognize that there may be a problem with your dog, maybe not only to diminish that dog's well-being because it's frightened and anxious because this is not a normal day, but sometimes these things can turn into real trouble because anxious dogs can freak out and they can panic. And this not only occurs with adults who want to pet them, but worst of all with children. And one of the real issues that sets them up in some cases for failure, not just to have an anxious, bad time of it, but to panic and become defensive aggressive. It's just so much going on. And, conflicting emotions. I mean, they want a snack, they want a piece of that turkey, but also they're kind of freaked out because of all the unfamiliar people. Even if it's just the family, which, of course, this Thanksgiving, that's all it's supposed to be. You can have a dog who's got a smoldering anxiety problem, been in motion for a long time. You don't know how to recognize it. You're going to miss it. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But let's just think about what's best for our pets and what actually can be a problem for them. And of course, some of them can become real thieves. Overwhelming smell of that great food, and they'll set up a diversion, like set a fire in another part of the house, and everybody runs to that so they can steal the turkey, um, raid the trash, and of course, chocolate. And in case there isn't somebody here who isn't aware of the risks of chocolate to dogs, it is a serious poison. And if your dog gets into chocolate, don't wait for symptoms like restlessness or agitation or seizures or coma. We go to the emergency hospital immediately before we have symptoms, and we avoid that disaster. Turkey bones, of course, in my work in emergency and in general surgery, I've done plenty of procedures to take those out of stomachs and intestines. You don't want that. So here is a little creature named Molly, very sweet dog, and she's in the exam room. And I just wanted to show you some of the indicators that, notice the way she's following her person. Now, she's in the doctor's office. Who isn't nervous there? But this gives you a pretty clear understanding of what these kinds of behaviors might look like. If it's out of the ordinary, if it's restless, then you may have a problem. Here's another one. Dogs tend to hang out under low spaces. They're denning creatures. They don't live in a den. They might take solace in a covered crate. We'll mention that again in a few minutes. But here's something to look for. If you have a dog who doesn't normally hang out under furniture, but on this busy day when there's a lot going on, maybe that's what your dog's doing. And if you look at this little girl, her name is Angie. Um, she doesn't really want to come out of there, even with her person squatting next to her with her side turned. That is a dog who just too freaked out to come out, just too nervous to do anything. I'm going to play that again real quick because there's body signaling I want you to notice. Notice the panting and the ears back and the eyes scanning back and forth. This dog is waiting for the other shoe to fall. She's a nervous wreck. Of course, it's in the doctor's office again, but you'll see this kind of behavior in a nervous dog just about anywhere. So I wanted to make you aware of a research study. Dr. Ilana Reisner, you'll see her credit at the bottom. She is one of the excellent members of the Veterinary Behavior College, who is a very important researcher, and a significant subset of her work has to do with dog bites to people. And this particular study had to do with dog bites to children. Well, Thanksgiving is a family holiday, right? So if there are small children around, I'm especially concerned about them if there's a nervous dog. And so don't gamble and look for those symptoms. And I have a few other videos I want to show you to give you some sense of what nervousness in a dog may look like. So we want to prevent this stuff. We don't want to have a dog growling and snapping at a person and then say, my goodness, what do we do now? Let's stay ahead of this thing and recognize that, gee, this dog may not be, Mr. or Miss Congeniality in every case, and we should be ahead of this thing and prevent trouble. Because again, we adults are busy on Thanksgiving. We really don't have a lot of time for babysitting the dog, right? So here's a study that Dr. Reisner did, Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. There were 203 children in the study who had been bitten. This was what's called a retrospective study, meaning that it was done on medical records that they amassed from cases that the Children's Hospital had already seen. So these are 203 children who'd gotten dog bites, and they found that about half of them were under 7 years old. These are little tiny kids. They love pets. These are the ones, and I can tell you from my experience in behavior medicine, people come to me with dogs who've bitten children, and my experience supports this research, is that the little ones are the ones who come up to the dog and want to hug it and kiss it. And that happened to me when I was 4 years old. 72% of these kids, the great majority of them, already knew the biting dog. So you think, oh, my dog already knows this child, shouldn't be a problem. That's most often when it occurs. And in fact, it is sometimes the family who has the pet who bites one of the children in that family. Okay, so don't believe that just because your dog knows this child that we don't have to worry about it. And look at this, positive interactions. These kids weren't being mean to the dog. These kids were wanting to interact with the dog, and the dog was still, like hiding under a chair. Familiar dogs, indoors. And here's the problem. If we look back at this slide right here, this is what happened to me. I was 4 years old, and my family was visiting another family. They had a son about the age of my older sister and myself, right in between our ages, and we were good friends. Well, these folks had a Boston Terrier, and it wasn't Thanksgiving, but it was a family get together, and the adults were at a card table playing cards, and that little Boston Terrier was under the table. Now I thought, what a perfect place for me to go in there and enjoy this little dog. I didn't have a dog, and I loved pets. So I got down on all fours. I was 4 years old. None of the adults were watching, and I crept under there because I was going to pet and snuggle that little Boston Terrier. Bit me right in the cheek. Okay. The adults, of course, panicked. Wasn't a severe wound, but the truth was that the dog had no escape. That dog felt panicked. Okay. So let's look at some other cases of dogs who aren't necessarily doing the same things as any other dog. This little guy here, he's just panting nervously, ears are back, tail down, kind of a low posture. Let me show you this same dog. This is Howie in this other video. He essentially is frozen. He doesn't want to move. He's panting nervously, body posture kind of low. Here he is on the left trying to get the heck out of there. He's trapped. And his people don't recognize that he's trapped because they see this thing from their perspective. That's the way we do it, isn't it? I mean, we look at things through our human lens, and we love our pets like they were little children in furry suits, right? Well, in reality, there is a great deal about dogs that is very much in step, very similar to the human behavioral model that is genetically programmed into our brains. They're very much like that, and that's what makes dogs man's and women's best friend, because they're so similar. But there are some important differences, and one of those things is that our dogs don't understand stuff like walls and windows, and they can easily feel trapped, especially if somebody like a 4-year-old little boy is crawling under the card table to pet and snuggle with that Boston Terrier. Had no place to go. He was under there because he was scared to begin with. The adults didn't know it. Now here's a video, and let me show you a couple things here. See this little white guy over here looking out the window, and then over on the big sectional couch, you probably might even miss this enormous Great Dane because this is the one that's normal. It's just relaxing. This is a surveillance video done by these folks at my suggestion. I had seen this little rascal, the little white fellow, for house soiling, urine soiling in particular. And when I talked to them, it turned out it was only happening when they were gone to work. All right, so let's see what this anxious dog is showing us. and I already gave it away. He's anxious. His big old buddy is just relaxed. He has no anxiety issues. But here's a little guy named Leaf, and he's walking along, and oh dear me, what's going on here? This is a behavior he never did when they were at home with him. He's just on the move. Now he's going to go over and check out this other window. This guy just does not relax. They took a whole lot of video of him. Now he's gone out through the dog door. Not a bad thing, but he's in motion. He's anxious. He's nervous, and this was going on anyway. So if you've got a guy like Leaf here who is smoldering an anxiety issue long term, and then we have additional things going on in the home that they don't necessarily understand at all, like festivities, we can have a dog who's already got some anxiety problems and then add other anxiety issues and then others on top of that. One behavioral trigger added to the other, something we call trigger stacking. Here's a guy that his name is Smokey, and he was a dog who's triggering complaints from the neighbors, and this is what the surveillance video looked like when he was home alone. This is a miserable dog, and I don't know how many of the folks who are part of us meeting right now have had issues with anxiety personally. I can tell you, I know something about it. It happens in varying degrees. Some dogs and some people have a huge problem with anxiety disorders. Others of us only sometimes. Well, the truth is that if we've got a dog who has anxiety when left home alone, of course, we call that separation anxiety, and that's something that can smolder for years and years. And if people don't come home to find their house damaged or house soiling, or they walk in and find the dog slobbering and losing its mind because the great savior has finally returned from the great hunt. It's just, the dog seems normal when you leave and normal when you get home, but you may not be aware that your dog is really struggling in your absence. And then again, on top of that, we have a holiday, and that smoldering anxiety can have other triggers stacked on top of it. Now, here's a dog who already you can tell from the start of this video, see the way his face is oriented away from the person, but he's looking up. This dog doesn't want to take his eyes off this great big creature, much bigger than he is, who actually, I think, probably means well. But the dog is nervous, nervous, nervous. And so this person, notice the lip licking. If you see that kind of thing, ears back, dog moving slowly, trying to stay out of trouble, wants to come over, actually loves this person who's petting it. And the person, I think, believes that maybe we can desensitize this dog. Maybe with enough petting, the dog would start to relax with these interactions. But instead, what is actually happening, unbeknownst to this well-meaning person, is that every time they lean over and get their big face close to this little dog's, the dog gets more and more nervous. And with this kind of repetition, this can actually strengthen the neural circuits in the brain and the long-term memory storage that carry these messages. And the old saying, practice makes perfect. You get enough of this stuff that reoccurs. Notice that little scratching? These are called displacement behaviors, along with the lip licking. This poor dog would love to be any place else. And you notice that as soon as this person stands up and starts to walk away, the dog goes, phew, great, that's over. Now I can happily follow my person. If this person really wants to have a safe and relaxing engagement with this dog, they should sit on the floor. Offer the dog a little food so the dog can choose to come to the person, and then they can enjoy their interaction. So what the heck has this got to do with nervousness of pets around holidays like Thanksgiving? Well, I'll tell you, if you already have a nervous dog, already have a dog with anxiety issues, we're actually, without meaning to, setting a dog up to have a freak out when there's even more triggers. I call that overwhelming sensory overload. So here's Ellie. This is the dog from the first slide, okay? And this dog, I'll be frank with you, has bitten people. That's the reason that they brought this dog in. And initially, you remember that first photograph with her laying on her back, looking like she was just having a wonderful time? It's the approach of people that's a real problem. And I don't care whether it's a dog who has the greatest history with children and unfamiliar people or even members of its own immediate family and has had nothing but a great history, you should always supervise pets when there are children present. And interestingly, in another study also done by Dr. Reisner, they found that something like 45% of the bites to kids occurred when there was an adult present. The person wasn't necessarily paying attention or didn't know what kind of body signaling to watch for. And here again, if you have a dog who has a history of having shown you some of these postures and behaviors, my greatest advice is securely put that dog in another room prior to allowing guests in, prior to all these triggers that could lead to a problem. Avoid the stress altogether. Okay? Keep them isolated. And I'll show you easy ways of doing that. But assume that children will make the same mistake that little 4-year-old Jeff Nichol made with that little Boston Terrier, because, you know, they don't listen, do they? They look right at you when you tell them stuff, but you know, it goes in one ear and out the other, and you can't blame them for being kids. We have to protect them, but scared dogs certainly can panic. This graphic here, I think, is pretty good because it shows that many of these behavioral symptoms or behavioral manifestations can be related to other anxiety driven behaviors. So separation anxiety being very common, of course, but fear of loud noises, generalized anxiety, dogs will have trouble with car travel. But look at this, a full 33 or 1/3, 33% of dogs with separation anxiety also have trouble with strangers. They're both anxiety related conditions. And there's a wonderful treatment, very safe, non-drug and non-prescription, I'll mention in just a minute, that is cleared for use in separation anxiety, which we have found to be helpful in many other manifestations of anxiety. It's a long-term treatment. But what can you do at the time? What can you do, say, on Thanksgiving Day? Well, preempt, reduce, and avoid, okay? So if you're gonna put a dog in another room, make it comfortable. Maybe the dog's usual sleeping room and prevent anybody else from going in there. And you can give this dog a canine specific behavioral opportunity. Dogs, you know, in the wild, the way they're genetically programmed is not to really eat from a bowl, the food that we pour out of a bag. They're they're really supposed to be doing with most of their time is surviving, right? And yes, they're predators, and in the wild they do eat what they kill, but they don't get that lucky every day. Most often they subsist on, frankly, dead stuff that they find out there, and they might come upon some carcass that's been picked over by a couple dozen other dogs, and there might be some little bit of grizzle in there with 2 calories left in it, and by golly, they're going to get that out of there. And they have the mental abilities and the dexterity of their paws and their mouth and their tongue and their lips to manipulate a carcass to get every last little bit of food out of there. Well, food, toys, and puzzles can mimic that and give the dog an opportunity to use those fundamental, essential behavioral foraging skills, and you are bringing out something essentially important to who your dog is by giving them an opportunity to be a dog. And so if on, say, Thanksgiving Day, if you don't feed your dog in the normal way from a bowl that morning, but put her food or his food in a food dispensing toy or puzzle and put that in your dog's own little room. And I'm going to show you this video of Lulu here in just a minute. But there are other things you can do too. If there's a lot of music and a gut stimuli that might trigger more anxiety for your otherwise anxious dog, there's great music that was scientifically developed for dogs called Through a Dog's Ear. Just Google that and you can download that music on your computer, or they'll send you a CD. But that promotes calming alpha brainwaves. Not the only solution, but can be very helpful. Or a noisy fan to drown out the sound of what else is going on in the house, okay? And if you're going to use a crate, make sure if it's a wire crate so that your dog is comfortable, nice fluffy pad, of course, but cover it. If it's just a wire crate that's like a cage, to the dog, it doesn't feel like a den. So you want to make it feel like a den so it's got a low roof and sides that are covered. But the opening, the doorway is not covered and it is not closed. Dogs by nature need a choice whether they enter or exit their den. So don't close the door. Don't want them feeling trapped. So let me show you Lulu here having a wonderful time. There she is with her food toy. And this is one of dozens of different kinds, probably more than dozens that are available. And you can Google food toys for dogs, or you go to a pet supply store. And some are meant for dry food, some meant for canned. But here's Lulu pushing this thing around, trying to figure out how to get that food out of there, which is what a dog does when they forage in the wilderness, surviving. How the heck am I going to get the food out of this carcass? Well, Lulu is surviving. Okay. So if you have a long-term anxious dog, if you want to help this situation so that when you have a family gathering, the otherwise low level of anxiety that's been plaguing your poor dog for months or longer is controlled, well, you can use this wonderful device called the Calmer Canine. Okay. And this is something that is not going to be helpful for just as needed use. It is not one of those things where your dog, oh, gee, here's Thanksgiving. We better do something right now. There are medications that are helpful for that. And of course, preemptive management, like we just showed you with Lulu and the food toy and through a dog's ear, that kind of stuff. But if your dog has a long-standing problem, separation anxiety, or as we say, off-label for something that it wasn't necessarily intended for, but it works very well for is other forms of anxiety, you can use the Calmer Canine. You can see the picture of this little dog in the corner here, this little yellow lab. Looks like a halo. Um, there's no sensation associated with it. This dog wears this thing. I'll show you what it looks like on another dog here in a second. But it does use electromagnetic waves, and it targets the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, and it adjusts what's going on in what's called the microglia, the nerve cells of the fear center of the brain. And these dogs feel better because their brains function better. Okay. And you can see with this iris setter down at the bottom that we have this little thing that's called a vest. You wrap this fabric around the dog's neck, and then another part of it around behind its armpits, around the chest, and then the little halo. It's very lightweight, and you just stick it by Velcro, push the button. And there are twice daily 15-minute treatments, but you don't have to hold the dog still like the picture up on the left. You can simply hold it there, but the vest makes it so much easier. So these are the kinds of things that I would like you to take away from this meeting. I want you to be aware of what your dog's behavior challenges are. I mean, yeah, there are certainly a few dogs out there who nothing ruffles their feathers. They're just cool cucumbers under all circumstances. But there aren't that many, really. Most of them have some kind of a challenge. And if we want to improve our dog's quality of life, reduce the heebie-jeebies, help them have a more peaceful, enjoyable life in a broad sense, we need to understand, well, is there anything going on we should know about? And very often, dogs are relaxed and quite sanguine when they're with their person and everything is peaceful and calm at home. But then when things change, you may not be aware of it. You know, again, you're putting together the dinner or you're enjoying your family on a holiday, and you're not watching your dog's behavior, and there could be a freak out smoldering. But also, you may be having a problem with a dog who has separation anxiety. You're not there. So if you get a surveillance camera, like a Nest Cam, Nestcam, you can Google that. You can get a 2-camera system for $99. Includes a smartphone app, so you can see exactly what's going on when you leave. If you want to do a 10 or 20-minute trial absence, get in the car and drive away and keep an eye on the monitor on your smartphone. Or if you don't want to invest $100 in a low-cost home surveillance system, you can take your smartphone and prop it up against a couple of books, or get a $10 or $15 little desktop smartphone tripod off the internet, and you can see what the heck your dog is doing while you're gone. It's pretty valuable to understand whether, you know, there are ways we could improve the quality of life of somebody we love, like our good dog. So yeah, not unusual to have anxiety during unusual events. And so also assume that children think they know more than adults. I've raised children. Anybody who's raised children, or whoever was a child, knows that sometimes the kids have to say, yeah. I love pets. I'm going to go hug that dog. And oh, brother, you don't need a face bite on a child or anybody for that matter, because you know Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong. So let's try to stay ahead of that. Let's understand what our dogs have going on and prevent it and set them up for success, and not inadvertently trigger more anxiety. So my suggestion is, yeah, consider something like the Calmer Canine. You can get that. The web address is CALMER, Calmer, the letter K, the number 9, calmercanine.com. I just wanted to show you a couple of brief videos. This is Sufi here, and she's just a cute little dog. She's just playful and loves life. And obviously her person took this brief video while they were home together playing. She did have a problem with noise phobia, with storms. And here she is. You can see her wearing the Calmer Canine halo. She's a black dog and large parts of her body, so you can't quite see that fabric there. But she doesn't have to be held still to wear her Calmer Canine. She can earn treats from her person, and she can walk around. I mean, you wouldn't have the dog wear the thing when you weren't at home. They'd shake and probably scrape it off with their paw. Wouldn't do it any harm. But, twice a day, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening.